Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's digital event, Jumpstart Your Project, a beginner's guide to Twinmotion. I'm Sam Anderson. I will be your host and leader today throughout this demonstration. And then I am also joined by the ArchVision team. So we have Corey and Kelsey here. They are here for support. They are watching the chat. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to add them to the chat. The team will be here to be able to assist you. So I will dive into a little bit more about ArchVision in just a moment. But first, just want to say welcome. Thank you for taking your time to join us. And hopefully you'll be able to walk out of this session with a little bit more knowledge on Twinmotion and how to actually use the tool. So I am Sam Anderson. I am the owner of Studio Ladder. I do have background in architecture, so this may be based a little bit in architecture the way that I describe Twinmotion, but it will also be tailored so that anyone who is a creator of any kind can come in, build their own scenes, and use the technology to their workflows. So at Studio Ladder, as I mentioned, I do have an architecture background, but I'm really focused in real-time rendering. So I was at Shop Architects and then moved to Epic Games, where I was creating marketing content for the teams and teaching architects how to use Unreal Engine and Twinmotion. So I'm doing the same thing, still producing visualizations for firms, helping out ArchVision here today, as well as doing some training for Epic and for ArchVision as well. So just to kind of talk a little bit about the real-time rendering tools. So you're seeing here a combination of Unreal Engine and Twinmotion in some of these visuals. And what is really cool about this real-time technology is it allows you to bring your visuals to the next level in a very quick manner. So essentially, like what you see on the screen is what you get for your final product. So a lot of these are, when I'm working inside of Unreal Engine Twinmotion, it's what you're actually seeing in the screen. There's not a need to hit a button, let it render overnight, and then take a look at it. You're getting that live feedback, which is very helpful for all industries, not just architecture, but automotive, fashion, and film industry as well. So today I'll be focusing on Twinmotion, and we'll dive into that a little bit in just a moment. So to kind of give you a good understanding of what we'll be doing today, we will be starting with our introduction, which I'm in right now. But I will take a moment to talk about ArchVision and then dive into why someone would want to use Twinmotion. We're going to start with the very basics. So this is for someone who has never really played around with Twinmotion and you really want to get an understanding of how to use it. For anyone in the audience who has used Twinmotion before, I am going to showcase just a few little new details that Twinmotion has added as of October 22nd. So hopefully there'll be a couple of things for you. And this really is just a time for you as a creator to be able to play around, be able to build something in Twinmotion. So this video we will be putting on YouTube so that if you need to return back to it, if I'm going a little bit fast on parts, if you're trying to follow along, you can then refer back to that at any point and be able to hit pause and continue as you would like. So with that, let's go ahead and take a moment to talk about why ArchVision, why Twinmotion. So ArchVision is a reseller of Twinmotion and Unreal Engine, but what's cool is they're actually a reseller of many 3D visualization tools. And with the marketplace as it is today, it can be a little overwhelming of understanding which tool is best for me. I have this skill set, this is my end goal. And ArchVision is here to help you with that. So this is part of the digital events that we put on. We've put on several throughout the past year. So I encourage you to check some of those out if you're wanting to dive into some of the other 3D visualization programs. I have also done one that gives a broader introduction to Epic Games. So Twinmotion, Unreal Engine, as well as reality capture. And with ArchVision, we'll be able to support you in your journey as you are getting the updates, just making sure that you are well informed on the products and make sure that you are utilizing your workflow to the best of its ability. So just making sure things are efficient for you and your team. Now, if you are like, okay, there's so many different things out on the marketplace, why Twinmotion? So each tool has their pros and cons. And for someone who has, used a couple of these products in the past, they're all great for different parts of your workflow. What I like to use Twinmotion for is for getting with visuals done. So Unreal Engine is my favorite tool at the moment for kind of producing high quality visual fidelity, customized 3D immersive experiences. But sometimes I just need to do a quick storytelling, a quick video, a quick image, and Twinmotion is my product for that. So this is going to kind of show you a little bit about the quality that is still achievable with Twinmotion. So you still have the path tracer and real-time ray tracing capabilities in Twinmotion. So it's going to allow you to come to those images very quickly. And this is great for if I'm working with designers or architects, or even anyone in the film industry who needs to have kind of quick iterations throughout. And maybe it's not going to be final pixel, they just need to express an idea, then Twinmotion is going to be a great use case for that. Now, one additional nice thing about Twinmotion is when you're working in Twinmotion, you might want to pass it off to another team to then take it into a immersive virtual reality experience where you can change out materials, you can open doors, you can go down the elevator, you can have animations. There is a VR capability in Twinmotion, but once you get into Unreal Engine, you can really start to push the boundaries of the final product. So what I like to say is usually if you have an idea, you can most likely do it in Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine is the next step, meaning that there's this larger learning curve where Twinmotion is going to be very easy for you to pick up, whether you have a 3D background or not. I would say if you just spend an afternoon playing around in Twinmotion, you will start to get a hang of it and it will come very easy to you as you work. So it is a tool that is empowering creators to really create storytelling for their designs and ideas. So today we are going to take it from the very beginning, as I said. So I'm going to go through this really focusing on the basics. So like if you're already a Twinmotion user, the very beginning might be a little bit like, I already know all of this. So, but I really just want to make sure that people, especially if you're coming from a different 3D tool, when you get into this, that you feel comfortable, that you take the time to understand how to move throughout the user interface so that you can be more successful as you are diving in. So with that, I will go ahead and start the demo portion of the presentation. So you'll see that I have this Epic Games launcher here. This is going to be where you get to download Twinmotion. Now, if you are a Revit user, you actually have access to Twinmotion. So you can go through your product's account and services and download Twinmotion through there. But if you are not a Revit user, you could go in and download Twinmotion for yourself using the Epic Games Launcher. So first, you'll just want to search for that Epic Games Launcher. Make sure you have that downloaded. There's instructions on how to do that. So you can follow a video for how to download the launcher, and then you'll be able to get started. So when you open up the Epic Games Launcher for the very first time, this might not pop up with the screen that I have. So you'll see that there's a lot of other elements that are part of Epic Games, which is also a benefit to Twinmotion because it means that a lot of the technology that's being built for these other industries are getting incorporated into Unreal Engine and Twinmotion, improving the user experience for creators. So we get to take advantage of something that was used for a video game, which I think, holistically is super cool that I have access to that as someone who's an architecture background. Now, if you are wanting to kind of explore the Epic Games Launcher, you'll see that you have these different tabs here. The library will just store all of the projects that you're working on in Unreal Engine, so you won't really need that. But if you click on Unreal Engine here, you'll be able to go to a Twinmotion tab at the top. Now, you'll see here that there are a couple of different things that you can check out. So here we have some support for you. If you don't want to download it yet and just check it out, you have the ability to do that here. And then you have all of the different Twinmotion versions that you have access to. So if you're working with someone else that is in a different version, you can select that here. So I will go ahead, let me go ahead and open up this Twinmotion 2023.2. And while that's opening, I had updated it this morning, but maybe there was another update that I didn't quite get. So I'll do this one more time as well, just in case. But essentially, you'll notice that there are a lot of different versions here. And if you're like, I don't really know where to start, I encourage you to start with the most recent one. one thing that you can do to check on the different releases and kind of understand where Twinmotion is in its process and in its progress, you can take a look at the Twinmotion public roadmap. So this is something that I always like to check out, as it is going to have the latest information on what is in progress for Twinmotion, what they're working on, as well as some of the things that they plan on working on. So many times I get questions to compare Twinmotion to some of the other features in other tools. So if you ever have questions of like, are there render layers inside of Twinmotion, which there are now, you could come here and take a look for yourself. So this is something that I like to review. And if you are a Twinmotion user, then you will notice that under the released, that there is a release that came out October 22nd. So you can see all the details for that here. So that will be available to you if you are wanting to dive into kind of the latest and greatest features of Twinmotion. So I'll go ahead and click on the Twinmotion icon that popped up. So this is that Twinmotion 2023.2.4, which if you're working with 2023 or 2024, it'll be similar. So all of this will appear whenever you open it for the first time. So you have some news and community elements here that you can click on. And then you also have some templates. So we'll play around with some of these templates. So these are set up so that different creators from different backgrounds can get started very quickly. If you are an architecture user, I like to start with this day and night skies. And I would say even if you are diving into Twinmotion for more of a storytelling aspect, then this one is going to be a great spot for you to start as well. So in addition to this, we also have a learning tab. So the learning tab from Twinmotion will provide some sample projects that you can open up and learn from. So it's helpful to know what your best learning strategy is. So, some people prefer to follow along videos. Some people prefer to actually open up a project and to dive around and see how the developers created a project. So if you're more of the hands-on, I want to look at a project that's done, then I encourage you to check out this Lake House Retreat. It's going to be a great one to use. And if you are wanting to just use a actual architecture project to play around with, then you are able to download the Snowden Tower sample project. This is from Revit, so you'll be able to actually work with a real model if that is something that's interesting to you. Now, something that we also have here are the plugins. So with Twinmotion, you can import a lot of different file formats, including FBX, OBJs, but there's something called Datasmith Direct Link. So Datasmith is a technology created by Epic Games that packages off your file with materials and with metadata and all the information it needs to come into Twinmotion and Unreal Engine smoothly. So this has been developed for a lot of different third-party platforms and are available to you. So if this is something that you are going to pursue moving forward, then it can be very helpful to download some of these plugins. This is going to improve that connection and the way that things come in, just to make sure you're not getting headaches down the road if there was something incorrect with your file import. So today I'm actually, have based this demo on a little bit more of using the tools within Twinmotion, so that if I'm not working with a model that you don't have access to. So instead we'll build out an environment together, and then at the very end, if you have a project, a model that you want to bring in, feel free to do so. So with this, I will go ahead and get started. I'm going to just pop into my Epic Games launcher and see if I can get that latest version and see if it has been updated. So what's cool about Twinmotion as well is that they do create or have updates really frequently. So this means that the developers are working on these tools and you're getting access to them when they're ready, which is really great as far as like progression in technology and being able to have access to that quickly. So I'll go ahead and close out of my old Twinmotion here, and we'll start fresh with the Twinmotion 2024.1.2. So with this, as I mentioned, we have a similar kind of home panel that pops up, but I'm going to go ahead and close out of this, and we'll take a look at the user interface. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time here. And the first thing that I want to talk about is the way that you navigate the project. So at the very top, of the window, you will see this gray navigation detail. So this is a way that is just saying, hey, welcome to Twinmotion. Here's how you move around. So you don't always have to have this open. I'll show you how to close it in just a moment. But I do want to point this out so that if you are brand new to Twinmotion, I encourage you to try each of these so you can navigate scene quickly. So if you take your left-hand mouse button, you'll be able to orbit the scene here. The scroll button in the middle, when you press it, is what is going to allow you to pan around. And then the right is that look around. So one additional thing that you can do is use your keyboard for this as well. So you have the move WASD. So I encourage you just to take a little bit of time. It can feel really silly, but just take time to move throughout the program, and you will be more comfortable once you practice. So another thing that you might notice is that somehow throughout all of this navigation, I got lost from the beginning scene or the beginning geometry that was in there. So if I select this here in the middle of the screen, I can hit F on my keyboard, and that's going to focus my camera to the object at hand. So once again, it's just selecting something inside of the scene and hitting F on the keyboard. So you'll see that it jumped and it's directing that orbit to the middle of the screen. Now, if you want to move around and, perhaps you're working on something like a product design or a piece of furniture, and you can see how quickly this is jumping throughout the project. One thing that you can do is you can control the speed of that camera movement by hitting 1 through 6 on the keyboard. So I just hit 1 on the keyboard, and now you'll see as I'm zooming in, it's quite slow. Whereas if I hit 6, then it is a big jump. So this is something that can be very helpful for you as you're navigating. So whether you're working on an architecture project where you need to dive into the detail, or if you're working on a fashion project or automotive where you really just always need to be in that level of detail, then you can select 1 through 6 on your keyboard. Now, if you are someone who is always working with another platform or another program and you want to have the navigation be somewhere, you could always hit this little settings cog here. And you're going to have different options for the way that you navigate the scene. So I like to just keep this as Twinmotion Editor. But if you were always working in Rhino and wanted to have something similar, you could select that. Now, I am going to hide the navigation panel for the rest of this demo, but if you want to keep it open so that you can have a reminder, feel free to do so. But I'll hide that navigation panel there. I do see a question about whether it is compatible with the 3D connection mouse. So I believe that there is something in the release notes that talk about this. So I'll just go answer that question real quick while we're on the navigation. So I believe here, this 3D connection, so that's for Mac support. So it looks like it's not available through Mac, but I know I've used it for Twinmotion in the past, a 3D connection mouse. So hopefully you're a Windows user and can take advantage of that Mac support, or sorry, that 3D connection support inside of the Windows. So great. So, okay, thank you for that question. Yeah, feel free to place any more. If I don't get to them as I'm going through the demo, we'll get to them at the end. So, okay, now we know how to navigate through the scene. I'm going to hide this panel up here so we have a bigger screen to look at. And I'm going to start talking about all the different tools. So whenever you open up for the first time, you'll see that there are several panels open. The panels that are open are corresponding to these blue highlights of the tools at the bottom. So you'll notice that if I hide them, I can get a larger screen here if I wanted to. But I'll go ahead and select these again, just because that's kind of the native way that you open up Twinmotion. And I want to have it look like what you're seeing on your screen. So on the right-hand side here, this is our scene graph and our properties tab. So our scene graph is going to be where everything is located that is brought into the project. So you'll see that when I click on these different elements, it is highlighting the element inside of the scene. And you'll notice that we also have a little folder here. In Twinmotion, they call these containers. So essentially you can create new containers or folders to organize your project with. So I like to do this if I'm working on context versus a building that I'm working on. I might create a new container and then move stuff around. So for instance, I could select the starting ground and the landscape. I'm using Shift on the keyboard to select both of those. and dragging and dropping that into the context here. So now this is all organized under context. So what we can do next is take a look at that properties tab. So whenever I select a element in the scene, you'll notice that we're getting a few properties here, but not that many. So we'll take a look more in a moment at what some of these properties look like. But as I mentioned earlier, a question that comes up a lot is whether or not Twinmotion has render IDs. So what you're able to do is whenever you're working inside a project and you know that you're going to need some of this for post-production later, and you're going to have to take it into Photoshop, then what you could do is you could select this layer ID, hit enable, and it's going to come up 1 through 5. So essentially you have 5 different layers that you can export. So you could assign objects in the scene to that render layer number. So for instance, if I was working on a project and I had a backplate of, so maybe a picture of the city that I'm going to be bringing a project into, I could have that render layer 1 so that whenever I export my images, I can then separate those out. So I probably won't dive into too much of exactly what that looks like, just because it's a little more advanced or further down in the creation process of when you're actually exporting. But essentially, you can pick whether you want that to come out as a PNG or as a mask, so being black and white, that you can then edit in the post-production. So those are available to you. This is where you're going to be able to control a lot of the different elements that are inside of the scene. Now here at the top, these are more navigation tools. So these are going to allow you to control the objects in the scene as far as how you are moving and manipulating them inside of the viewport. So we have our kind of move, rotate, and scale here. So, I was chatting with some other developers the other day, and they mentioned that their favorite was to have it on this select tool, because you'll see with the gizmo, you can still move this object around. So if you're kind of playing around with some of these buttons up here, I would take a moment to move this object around just so you can get some familiarity with how to move it, how to rotate it. One additional way of moving throughout a scene is also coming down here to this XYZ. I'm going to select this and it's going to turn blue. And now you'll see that it's open up here, and I can actually rotate this here using more accurate numbers. So I could come in and put 90 for it to rotate and hit enter, and you'll see that it happens inside of the scene. So this is a great way of manipulating your project. I just hit Control Z there. So if you are ever working and do something that you don't want to do, Control Z, very similar to all 3D programs, will get you back into the state that it's just in. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this. And this is a great reminder too, that as you are working in Twinmotion, and if you are unfamiliar with what the tools are doing, you can always hover over the different tools inside, and a little toolbar or tooltip will pop up and let you know what that means and what it's doing for you. So those are helpful for new beginners as well. Okay, so we talked a little bit about some of these orbit tools. We also have these tools here. So this is going to be the tool for picking your material. So this is going to allow me to see this, granite here, or the marble here, by selecting this object. And you'll see that now the properties tab has a little bit more controls that we could edit in the future. Now, one thing that I do want to note for any Twinmotion users that I have here that are a little more advanced, one thing that is new as of October 22nd is this triplanar UV. So this is going to allow you to reassign, or it's going to read the UVs a little bit differently, allowing you to not have to have perfect UVs whenever you bring stuff into Twinmotion. So if we have time, we'll take a look at that here in a bit, but you'll see that, if you can play around with this ball to see what it looks like, but this is being set up for world space, meaning that it is playing a UV based on the world. But if I had something rotated and wanted a more specific UV, I could change that to local space here. For now, since this is a sphere and Twinmotion, this is a native Twinmotion asset, I'm going to have it as off because the Twinmotion team has this perfect UV for the sphere here. Okay, so now that we kind of have had to play around with a little bit of the properties here, let's go ahead and take a look at that last element here, at the top of the button, at the top of the toolbar, which is the rendering tool. So you'll notice that when you select this, this is almost like pausing the scene, and it looks, maybe pixelated for you. What this is doing is this is turning on the path tracer. So this is utilizing your RTX card, if you have an RTX card, and it's going to allow you to progressively render to a certain level of pixels. So this is going to give you the most accurate depiction of lighting and reflections and refraction. However, I like to work in raster rendering for the most part. So raster is going to be what you see on the screen is what you get. This is the quickest way of creating elements inside of Twinmotion. And then if you needed to, at the very end, jump into a very high quality, you can always hit this button at the top. Now, I do want to note that you can also do this hitting R on your keyboard. So if you are ever playing around inside of Twinmotion and kind of get stuck and you're like, I'm not sure what's happening, you may have just hit R there. So you can always hit R to toggle on your keyboard and it will go back to the raster rendering. Now on the left-hand side, we have our library here. So this is going to be the place where you have access to very many assets. So we have, if you go to Megascans is another tool within the Epic ecosystem. And the surfaces are the materials that you can bring in. So I encourage you to check this out. Like if I go to the leather here, you'll just see how many leather fabric materials there are. There are hundreds of materials for you. And with your Epic Games account, so create an Epic Games account to download the launcher in the first place. And then through that, you have access to all of these materials. So you would simply hit download here, and then you'll be able to drag and drop it into the scene. So if I wanted this little plate to be leather, it's a very thick leather here. So on the right-hand side, you'll see all the different settings for this as well. So whenever you're bringing elements in, the kind of like workflow that I like to think about is bringing in stuff from the library into the scene and then editing it as needed on the right-hand side. So that's kind of the typical workflow that I work with. And here you'll see how many different settings that you have for this project. But I'll go ahead and hit Control-Z to go back. And I encourage you to take some time to explore all of the different tools here. So there's vehicles, there's characters, some tools that are helpful for architects, such as sections and notes. So a lot of different elements here that you can really create create your ideas or storytelling that you're looking for. One additional thing is the user library. So the user library is something where if I'm bringing in elements that I know, like a couch that I like to use in all projects, I can bring that into one project and then save it into the user library. So one way that you can do that is if I wanted to use this sphere in every project, you could right click, select add to user library, and then automatically it is working in the back end to bring that into your user library. Now, what's helpful with this is if you wanted to work with several team members, you could all direct your project user library to the same place so that you're all working off the same user library. Now, this here, you'll see that I have a lot of elements already in here. These are actually RPC assets. So RPC assets are assets that ArchVision offers so that you can have these assets and use them in a wide range of 3D visualization tools. So here I have something that is represented inside of Twinmotion, as well as Unreal Engine, as well as Inkscape, and so on and so on. So in order to have access to where a lot of these elements live, you can always go up to Edit at the top, go to Preferences, and you'll see that there are a lot of different options here. So you have where your save. If you want autosave, you can select that here. So a lot of these elements that are a little bit more fine-tuned of where all of the different aspects of your project are saved, they'll be under this custom paths. So here under custom paths, you could go to user library and then set this to match another teammate if you want to work off the same library. Okay, so now we have covered our library. An additional thing at the bottom that I want to talk about is the stats. So I like to have this selected and have it up so that as I'm bringing in different elements into Twinmotion, you know exactly what you're working with. And if you bring something in that's very, very large, then you get a kind of an immediate notification of, hey, this is big. And what I mean by that is you'll see that this is all green right now. So I in the clear space. Green is letting me know that it's good. And then once this starts to drop below 30 and then lower, it's going to change colors, and it's going to let you know that you might want to take some time to look at the different stats and see if there's something that is causing your experience to be so low. So like right now, as I move around the screen, I know it might be a little laggy on Zoom, but for the most part, it's very smooth for me. And that's being reflected in this 145 frames per second. Now, for anyone who's worked with Twinmotion in the past, this might look a little bit different. So as of October 22nd, they have the ability for you to explore the textures and meshes as well. So this is something that could be very helpful for you as you are starting to debug your project. Now, at the very bottom here, we have our different tabs that are going to kind of mimic the way that you move throughout Twinmotion or the workflow that you use. So we have our import tab, which we'll talk about at the very end if we have some time, but this is going to be where you bring in your geometry. So I talked about the Datasmith direct link, that's here, and the second tab that automatically opens up. But if you have an FBX, you can bring it in here. You also have the ability to bring in animations, landscapes, and point clouds. So you're importing your assets into the scene. You can then start to apply materials, populate the scene. So this here pops up on the right-hand side. So we'll have place, paths, and urban that we'll take a look at in a moment. Then we have our media tab where we'll create imagery and then we'll export. So now that we have opened up, Twinmotion, looked at the user interface, I now want to dive into bringing something to life, getting something started. And so with that, I'm actually going to go back to one of those templates and open it up. And just so we can see how quickly that has stuff prepared and ready for us to use to create something beautiful very quickly. So in order to do that, I'm going to go up to the file on the left-hand side. I'm going to select Show Home Panel. So once we're back into our home panel, we'll go over to the Templates tab, and I'm going to open up this day and night skies. So if you are working with this project for the very first time, you may have to download it. So you'll see that there are some download buttons on the icon in the top right-hand side of each of these thumbnails. But you'll see I've already had this one downloaded, so I'm going to go ahead and open it, and I'm not going to save my project. Now, once this opens, we'll take a quick look at the elements that are already embedded, and then we're just going to start exploring, building out a beautiful scene, and then you will be able to import anything that you want to into the project. So I have this template that is open. It honestly doesn't look too different. We've got the ground in there, we've got the landscape back there, but it looks pretty much the same. The place where it's most different is in this media tab. If you select this tab, you'll see that there are a lot of different elements here, images that are already ready to go. So if I knew that I wanted to have a sunrise or a sunset view, or I'm working inside of a city and I don't want to have to create the city, Twinmotion does have a lot of access to HDRI. So this is essentially what they've done. They've created all of these different backgrounds for us to get started with, and then you could always go in and edit as needed. So especially like if you're doing some fun storytelling, this is a very great place for you to start. So I'll actually go ahead and start with one of these day views here. And I'm going to go over to the right-hand side. So something that we didn't cover in the scene graph was this ambiance tab. This ambiance tab is going to be where everything inside of the environment settings is housed. So essentially, you'll notice that when I have the scene graph selected, there's not very many properties here, but when I select the ambiance, then you'll see all of these different options that we have access to. So for right now, we are going to start to build out a scene a little bit and start to play around with some of these settings. And then we'll take a look at how do we capture these in each of these. So in order to get started, I do have this, the 6th day is the one that I have selected. Now, I want to keep this image just in case if I mess stuff up, I want to come back to it. So what you can do is when you have a image selected, you can hit the plus button on the left-hand side, and this is going to create a new image for you. So I'll just drag and drop that down to the bottom, and I'm going to name this day demo. So how I name that is by selecting these ellipses at the top of the thumbnail and hitting rename. So now I have the image name. I'm working with it. I'm not going to mess up the original because I know I have it selected. by this pink outline. Now on the right-hand side, I can come in and I can start to take a look at some settings. So this has an HDRI, but it still allows us to take advantage of some of the different settings inside of Twinmotion. So you can start to play around with some of these, I guess the kind of pink line, you can drag and drop it as you like, and you'll notice that it could start to rain. So if we do have a little bit of storm clouds in here if we wanted to indicate that we could. You'll also notice we can make it snow as well. So with an HDRI, you'll notice that the clouds aren't changing. I'll show in just a moment how you could remove that in case you wanted to have a different sky that's kind of matching the weather. So if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that there's an HDRI environment. So when I enable that, I'm toggling that enable, it's going to turn it off to just be the traditional Twinmotion sky here with the clouds. But I honestly like the HDRI, so I'm going to turn that back on and I'm going to just have it go back to a nice sunny day. But here you have the ability to really control different settings inside of Twinmotion as far as the environment and particle goes. So I encourage you to check some of those out. Now I'm going to kind of keep on diving here and I'll just show this ocean one. This is just kind of a fun one to turn on as well. So let me just move this starting ground real quick. I'm actually going to delete that. So you can go up to the right-hand side, right-click, select delete. And you'll see now that we have this nice, beautiful ocean scene. So, I mean, you'll see that I just did this in a few moments and you'll see that these reflections are very nice. So having this template embedded just kind of allows you to create something really beautiful really quickly. Now for this ocean, I'll go ahead and turn it off for now. But one thing that I do want to do is I want to take a look at some of the different elements that we can bring in inside of Twinmotion. So, you do have the ability to set the location here. So if I wanted to, actually we'll do this together. So when I was kind of thinking about what I wanted to demo today and I want people to be able to follow along, I thought it would be nice for you to be able to pick and develop a place that you love. So I will be working off of my grandparents' farm in the neighborhood that they kind of grew up in. And so what I'll be doing is kind of developing a scene, and then hopefully you can do the same thing for a place that you love, and then be able to drop assets in as you like. So in order to do that, you could go in here and set the location here. This is going to tell Twinmotion where the sun is. But if you wanted to, you could also go over to this populate tool at the bottom, go to urban, and here you can actually bring in geometry of that place. So I'm going to type in Watertown, Tennessee. Let's see if it comes up. Okay, there is a Watertown, Tennessee. And you'll see that it populates here in this OpenStreetMap. So as I zoom out or zoom in, I could select how much of this area that I want to bring in. And this is using OpenStreetMap, so you will need to be connected to the internet to use it. But essentially what it's going to do is it's going to bring in a very basic geometry that you can start to build off if you wanted to. So I'll go ahead and select download in place now that I have a region selected here that I want to work with. And depending on how much of a region you are wanting to bring in, it might take some time. But here we go. So we have a few buildings here. So, this is a very rural area. So we are not seeing too many buildings, but this can be very helpful. You'll see that there's an area that's a little bit green, and let's see, got some roads in here as well. I'm going to bump up the brightness just a little bit so we can all see it a little bit easier. So in order to do that, I just came over to this ambiance, went over to the camera tab and increased the exposure. So there's a lot of different settings here that you can use to control the camera. But now I'll go again and take a look at these objects. So I'm going to hit F on my keyboard with the box selected. And you'll see that we have some, we have some roads in here. We have the context ground. So I'm actually going to go up to that context ground. You'll see that we have now added roads, buildings, areas, and then the ground that was in here that comes with it. So there's a couple of elements here that we now have that we can work with. One thing that I want to do is I'm going to select this starting landscape. This is what was first brought inside the project. You can go ahead and right click that and select delete, because I want to actually bring in and be able to manipulate my own landscape. So this area in Tennessee, whenever you're driving through, the roads are pretty flat, but then the surrounding area is very hilly. So one way that we could do this is by going over to our library, going over to vegetation, going down to landscapes, and we are going to drag and drop the rocky landscapes in. So if you were working something that was a little more flat, you could do that. But you'll see we are able to bring in this landscape beyond. This is probably a little more mountainous than the area that I want. So I could always sculpt this as well. So here you'll see I'm changing the diameter of my tool, and I could really go in and start to manipulate this as I like. So I'm very far from this, so maybe this needs to be much more intense. But there we go. I mean, I could spend a very long time doing this, and it's almost, it's pretty fun as well. So there's kind of all these different sculpting tools that you can do. Let me just do it here in the foreground so you can see it as well. Let me zoom in here. But yeah, this is something that you could, spend a lot of time exploring and developing your foreground or background as you would like. So I encourage you to play around with that. Now, something that I might want to do so that all of this kind of land matches is start to play around with this material here. So this brown material is gray, and I want that to be green. This is going to be a very luscious green summer day. So what I can do is I can go over to my library, go to my materials, and there are a lot of different material options here. You can also just type in what you're looking for. So I'll hit grass there, and I can just drag and drop the grass in. So, I could manipulate this to match the other grass that I'm working with. So this is a little bit of a better match. So now I have some grass, I have some exteriors, I have these buildings. So one cool thing about this is that it's telling me that there's a few buildings in the scene, and that it's telling me the height of the buildings. So this is pulling from the OpenStreetMaps, but if I wanted to say actually nothing in this area is over a couple floors, you could adjust the height as needed if you didn't think something was correct, or if you wanted to edit that as well. Now, one thing, as you're building something out, you'll notice that all of the buildings that were brought in were just white. So one thing that you could do is you could go over to the library tab, go down to Mega Scans here, and we'll go over to the 3D assets, and you'll see that there's a building option here. So in this building option, there's a section called wall. So here you could go into, pick a brick building here and drag and drop them into the scene so that you're getting a nice brick exterior. So I'm using this as an example to show you how many assets you have available so that you don't have to go in and model everything separately. You can have access to the assets and do something really called kit bashing, where you're bringing in different assets and building using those assets based off what's already in the library. So all of this is available to you. Once again, if you were working with something you already have a model for, you can obviously use that as well. Now, one thing that I'll now take a look at is how you can start to place some of these assets. So I'll move on to some of the vegetation. So you'll see that once you go to vegetation, I could bring in some bushes and some trees as well. So I'll go ahead and go down to the bushes. Say I want to bring some fern into this scene here. What I can do is I could select the fern and I could drag and drop it individually into the scene. Now, if I wanted to have like a little array of fern here, you can see how long that would take to actually make or develop. So Twinmotion, that makes that easy for you by going over to the Populate tab. And similar to how we brought in different elements using the Urban tab, you also have the ability to bring in character paths as well as place, which is going to be what we use to really develop the scene with a bunch of geometry. So I'll go over to the paint selection here, and I'll drag and drop this in, and then I can just start painting the fern. So this is extremely helpful for if you're working with trees or grass. You have the ability to bring in multiple types of fern. And it's essentially doing, procedural generation content so that you have the ability to go in and then change some of these elements. So If I wanted to increase the density, I could do that by selecting kind of the individual plants here, or if I wanted to select all of them and increase the density, I can do that as well. So each of these tools in the Populate tab have very, I guess I would say, precise ways of adding geometry into the scene. So scatter is going to allow you to select geometry. So if you were working with street elements and on a boulevard and wanted all of the boulevards to be green, that could be one option for you. The spacing tool is essentially an array tool, so it allows you to array things very nicely. And then the area tool allows you to actually go in and select an area that will have the assets in it. But for now, we've gone and placed some plants in. We already have, this building in here that we'll just work with for now. Maybe I'll go ahead and assign a concrete material just so it can look like a very, this is looking more European, I guess, with a very modern concrete object or scene. Let's do a for concrete. Here we go. So we've got our concrete that I've been brought into the geometry here. And then we can always change the UV as well in some of the materials. Once again, that's by hitting the T on your keyboard or selecting this material picker, selecting your geometry, and then you can go in and you can once again play around with some of the world space tools here. Or see, we can also increase the scale. So now we have our project here, a very simple building inside of Tennessee. And I'm going to select the scale here to be a little increased, just so we're working with a greater concrete size here. This area, let's pick an area that's a little greener for the background. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start setting up some cameras. So we have just a few minutes, and what I wanted to do is kind of just show you how you can get comfortable with the tools, and then you can really start to play with them. So a lot of the stuff that I've mentioned today are just some of the fundamentals of Twinmotion. And then once you start to play around, you can really start to develop your scene and create and export assets in that, including images, videos, panoramas, and presentations. So if you're looking at the screen, this top of the media tab has all of these different icons. So you'll see that we, created this image. You'll see that the thumbnail looks nothing like the image that we worked with. That's totally fine. Essentially, what we can do is hit this refresh button. It's going to update the camera based off of where our viewport is. So you can always edit that as you'd like. So here, I'll go ahead and hit refresh once more so that we have our thumbnail matching our viewport. And if you wanted to, you could come in here, create videos, create different sequences. So this is going to allow you, if you wanted to have a construction scene where you're bringing in different cranes and you're showing the development of a project, that's where you could utilize the sequence. We also have the 360s and panorama sets, as well as presentation. So presentation will allow you to create an executable where someone will be able to walk throughout this space. So for some of this stuff, this is just a little more, I don't want to say advanced because they're not hard to set up, but they're just take a little more time than what we have for today. But I encourage you to check out some of our past digital events where I dove into a little bit more of the specifics for some of these media tools. But for now, with the last couple of minutes that we have, let's just go ahead and create a video real quick, and then we can take a look at some of the settings, and then I'll save the last 5 minutes for any questions that I may not have gotten to. So here with the video tab selected, I can hit this plus button. This is going to create an image or thumbnail based off of what you're seeing on the screen. As someone who wants to be a little more fine-tuned with the settings inside of the camera, I can come over here to this camera setting and really start to play with some of the focal length here if I wanted to. You could play around with the depth of field as well. So if I wanted this at this point, this is a mountain, this to be blurry in the background, you can always use this pick focus tool to focus that a little bit. So giving you a lot of control. That's really great for if you're working with like vignettes where you're zoomed in and playing around with some of your features. Now you also have film back. So this is going to allow you to kind of set the different cameras that you might be familiar working with. And then at the very end, we have our composition overlays. So this can allow us to develop use grids in case we want to make sure that we're working with rule of thirds for our scene. So this can all be very helpful and really going to allow you to use your artistic license on some of these elements. So you'll see that we have vignetting here. And one thing as an architect is that you may want to make sure that this parallelism is turned on, and that is just going to make sure that all of your verticals are aligned in the scene. So I'll go ahead and just select the refresh button once more on the left-hand side. And what I'll do now is I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so that I'm creating that movement, like a nice smooth movement. So I'll zoom in here and say we just want it to be, a little more zoomed in on the building itself. And I'm going to hit the plus button here. And what that's going to do is it's going to automatically generate a camera path for you. So you'll see that it's moving now. This is at 10 seconds. If I wanted it to be quicker, I can turn this to 5 seconds and then hit play again. It'll be moving throughout that space. Now, a question that I get a lot is, can you start to fine tune that? So one thing that I would mention is that you could always use the coordinates here under the XYZ. If you have that selected, let's see what I can make sure that you guys can see. Okay, here we go. The XYZ here is selected. When you're working with the different cameras, you do have access to that with this default viewport. So here I'm able to set the location of the camera. So that is very helpful if you want to stay at eye height. So you could go in and make sure that you're at eye height for each of those. So with this, you now have a video that you created within seconds. You could really start to bring different grasses in for it to be beautiful, play around with different settings. One of the nice things about this is if you're working with one of these templates, like as you select these different views, you could see how fun it would be to create a scene. And once you have, I have that box in there, I have those the vegetation in there as well. So now I can imagine it in different night scene, day scene here as well. Here, this is not that interesting. I don't have any lights in, but it's available for you if you wanted to. So that is one thing that I didn't have time to cover today, which was the lights. So that's a part of this library here that you can drag and drop stuff in. But the main idea of this demo was for you to really kind of just understand some of the fundamentals where things live in the user interface so that you can feel more comfortable with how to build out a scene. So I encourage you to explore a lot of these HDR environments, the vehicles. We even have substance materials available for you as well. And, as you are building out your videos and imagery, you always have the ability to hit export at the bottom. So let me just make sure that you're able to see that here. So here we have our export tab. This is going to bring it up on the left-hand side. So I'll open that up one more time so you can see it. When you hit export, this will be blue and this window will open up. And here you could start to add in the images and videos that you've made. So here I have my image, my video. If I wanted to come into the details, you could then start to kind of play around with some of the motion blur and dive into a little bit more of the specifics of how it's being exported. But essentially, this allows me to do batch rendering. So now I have an image and a video that I can work with that I will be able to export in seconds. So with that, I know I'm getting at time, and I know that didn't cover everything, and we really just developed a simple scene, but I imagine that if you are here, you are most likely a creative person in some degree, and I hope that you take time to explore this and play around with some of the different features inside of Twinmotion. So for that, I'm going to leave the last 5 minutes for questions. So I'm going to go over to the right-hand side and see if there's some questions. So yeah, we've got one from Kyle. Sam, what is the best way to see a part 2 to this tutorial? Would you like to see a demo showing the workflow between a 3D model, SketchUp, for example, and Twinmotion? Yeah, so I believe that in the YouTube videos that were shared, I go in a little bit more detail about that workflow of how to bring in elements. So once again, I'll just take a moment to kind of showcase a little bit of that. So if you have, your scene built out here now, you can come into here, hit import, and bring in a object that you would like to. we could direct you, Kyle, if you message us. Let me go ahead and pull up our email here. If you message us, we can also send you videos that have a little bit more information about that. So what's cool about ArchVision is they're very well connected with each of the partners. And so they know the experts to talk to, where to find that information. So if you sent us an email and ask for some of those videos, then I can curate a selection of those videos for you that are going to dive more into the specifics. So I know in the past we've talked a little bit more about some of those workflows and some of that, the direct link Datasmith videos are there. Yeah, it looks like Corey, you may have already answered that. Like we said, I'm always happy to demo more. So I am an authorized Unreal Engine trainer, so I very much know all of these tools in and out, so happy to share more. But Corey, did you want to share anything to add on?
Well, I had actually sent a message, but I only sent it to our internal group. So I was just saying I have office hours tomorrow, and Sam, if you're joining us, maybe we can just do a 20-minute, 20 minutes tomorrow during my office hours on SketchUp to Twinmotion, and we can talk about SketchUp to Enscape workflow that Kyle's already mentioning that their firm uses. It'd be good, great time to do that if Sam's joining us tomorrow.
I'm happy to do that, and it would be good to understand for you, Kyla, as well, like with your firm, what are the Enscape features that your team most uses, and if you're looking into Twinmotion, what are the equivalents of those, and I can kind of help detail that. And then also like knowing, when does your team want to use, when your team wants to use Enscape, when they might want to use Twinmotion, we can help provide that information too if you're curious about the different tools and like when to use each. So we'd be happy to set that up for you as well. So thank you for sending that office hours tomorrow. So I'll be there tomorrow, and I can definitely dive into more of the specifics on that feature itself. But hopefully this was a nice place to get familiar with some of the tools, where they live, how to start playing around with Twinmotion. Once again, we'll continue to be doing a lot of these digital events. And so if, next week, I'm actually doing one on Unreal Engine. And so it's going to be a very similar, just kind of getting started with Unreal Engine. I understand that diving into tools can be overwhelming sometimes. So my goal is to kind of help you learn some of the very basics so that you are able to develop them on your own, and then also just be familiar kind of with how each of these programs can get started. So with Unreal Engine, I will be doing that. As I mentioned earlier, Unreal Engine has a little bit of a larger learning curve. So just be prepared for that if you're interested. But hope to see you for that. Feel free to email us if you want more information on that one as well. But with that, Corey, do you have anything else you want to add? I just want to make sure, I think I got the questions that were in there, but is there anything else you want to add before we close out?
No, I think we're good. Sam, thanks again for doing this today, and it was great introductory overview of Twinmotion today, and let's continue tomorrow and next week as well.
I'll be joining for all those office hours, so happy to pull up any models and answer any specifics that you may have. So with that, we will say farewell and hope to see you at our office hours or at a future digital event. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you for taking your time out of your day to be with us, and happy learning and exploring Twinmotion. Thank you.